Good evening, good night, good morning, good day, wherever you are in the world. Let me take this opportunity to welcome you to this series put on by the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Our topic this evening will be on sport administration and its impact on sport development and athlete performance. We have with us here this evening quite a few well-known, the world over, persons in sport administration, some from their playing days and now from their administrative responsibilities in various disciplines of sport. And we will hear from them in the next hour and a half in terms of the discussion on that topic of sport administration and its impact on sport development and athlete performance. At the University of Trinidad and Tobago, and specifically the Academy of Sport, we are privileged to have leading the charge at the university, someone in the person of Professor Prakash Prasad. And I can tell you sport continues to benefit from the support from our president, who himself was I think he's still a black belt karateka. So he understands the value of sport, and we are fortunate to have him leading the charge at the UTT. And that's why you will hear about some of the successes of our university. You will continue to see them throughout the virtual platform as well on our social media platforms. I now want to bring greetings on behalf of the University of Trinidad and Tobago, Professor Prakash Prasad. Professor?
Thank you, Ian. Our senior manager at UTT in Sports and Leisure Studies, and himself a gifted administrator. Let me say good night to our distinguished panel, Mr. Ephraim Serret, Ms. Sonia Johnson, who I understand will join us in a while, Mr. Mushtaq Mohammed, and Dr. Bridget Adams. So I said good night to you and all viewers, wherever you are. Trinidad and Tobago, we are fortunate and blessed to have an abundance of talent in a variety of fields, but particularly in sports. When we look at what our sports persons would have done worldwide, we punch way above our weight. For a small country of 1.4 million people, the amount of world-class athletes we have produced, I would think, and I don't have the exact numbers, but I think per capita, probably be near the top of the world, if not at the top of the world. Now, to be a distinguished and successful sports person worldwide, you must have talent. But as we say locally, talent alone doesn't cut it. This talent must be nurtured, must be developed over a period of time. And that's where the sports administrators come in. And I think, the fact that we have done so well, it's a clear indication of the great job that the sport administrators are doing presently, and those of the past that have done. So I want to congratulate them. In this regard, UTT also understands that. That's why we have these programs in sports management, etc., the master's programs, and we will continue to do that and support this initiative of Trinidad and Tobago to develop sports persons that can take the country worldwide, carry the flag high, flying worldwide. And indeed, I would assume that into the not too distant future, to use the local, the world, what people say the mecca of sport, that UTT will become the mecca of sports in the West Indies. So again, good night. Thank you, and I look forward to this most, interesting discussion. Good night again, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Professor Prasad. So let me take this opportunity to introduce to you our panelists for this evening's discussion. We have Mr. Ephraim Serret, who is no stranger to sport administration in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Serret is a former president of the NTRIAs, NTRIA-TT, and he's currently the advisor to the Minister of Sport and Community Development. As an athlete, Mr. Serret also has the distinct pleasure of being the first Trinidad track athlete to be champion at the junior and senior level in the same year. Welcome, Mr. Serret. There's so much more I can say, but time is of the essence.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we also have with us this evening our only doctor on the panel, Dr. Bridget Adams. She is a member of the Coaching Advisory Panel of the International Netball Federation. She is also a member of the Global Intelligence of World Netball, and she's also our UTT High Performance Head Coach for Netball. Bridget also was the captain of the first West Indies netball team that participated in some competitions many years ago. Welcome, Dr. Adams. Next, I want to introduce a very good friend of mine as well. He wears many hats. Tonight he doesn't have on any, but he's with us in the capacity of President of the Caribbean Zonal Volleyball Association, that's CAZOVA. He's also the Vice President of the North Central America and Caribbean Zonal Volleyball Association. And he's also a Vice President of the International Volleyball Federation. That's Mr. Mushtaq Mohammed, and he's also a senior sport officer. We are privileged to have him as a senior sport officer at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Mushtaq, in his time as a sport athlete, played cricket, but he administrated volleyball. So he understands sport from all levels. Welcome, Mr. Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Ian, and I prefer to be called Mushtaq in this forum.
Okay, Mushtaq. Our next panelist, who is not here with us at this point in time, but will be joining us shortly, is the dynamic Ms. Sonia Johnson. And when you hear from Ms. Johnson, you will understand how passionate she is about sport and the development of sport and young people in Trinidad and Tobago. Ms. Johnson is the current president of the Trinidad and Tobago Chess Association, and she's also chair of the Planning and Development Commission of the International Chess Federation. So soon, Ms. Johnson will be joining us, and we'll give her that warm welcome that she's so deserving of. So let me say to our panelists again, pleasant evening and welcome. I also want to let you know that this is not going to be an easy road. So Mr. Serra, this is not a Mondo track. This discussion is going to be held on a grass track. So expect bumps along the 100-meter distance. Richard, this is a hard court. Not that night indoor court, because this topic, we are sure we're going to get some discussions that will bring out what really needs to be done and what has been positive from sport administration in Trinidad and Tobago. And Mushtaq, this, of course, is straight out of a hard concrete volleyball court where athletes will be requested to dive, taking into consideration that there may be bruises along the way. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Yeah, and that's how I started playing volleyball, on a hard court. So I am ready.
Okay, well done. So let's start with a question. And the discussion, I want to term what we're going to have as a discussion and not so much as questions and answers. So the discussion should be as fluid as possible. Feel free, any one of our panelists, to chime in at any time that you want to share a point or add to a point made by another member of the panel. So let's have a wonderful open discussion on this topic this evening. Sport administration and its impact on sport development and athlete performance. Now, there is a level of misconception, and you will hear from time to time as to the difference between sport development and sport for development. And we in sport know that these are two totally different concepts. Share with us, to start the discussion in terms of sport development, what are your views? And I'll invite Mr. Serra to start the discussion on this. Yeah. What are your views? He'll be leading off the charge from the 4x1 relay team.
He's an anchor man, but anyhow,
all right.
I run in any lane.
What are your views? Yes.
As you're quite rightly indicate, there's a difference between sports for development and sport development. Sport for development is really in the early stages where we nurture the young people to come to that level, preparing and getting them introduced to the sport. And because of that misconception and people using the term interchangeably, we end up with some problems. At the administrative level, that's where you have to have your youth programs, your junior programs, and then bringing them into the development aspect when they get to that next level. If I can speak from the NGA's point of view, we would have developed what we call kids athletics. So that was our sport for development. So you have the young athletes, or young people, I should say, young children, taking part in sport, and we call it the fundamentals of track and field. And I stress on fundamentals of track and field, where they learn about running, jumping, and throwing. And that is the basis that we use for, sport for development. Through that program, we would have seen athletes or persons coming out with their strengths. So you'd have, they are ball throw. So you would have recognized somebody who could tell the ball, so that may be a good person for javelin, jumping. So you either a vertical or horizontal jumper, and then sprinters, or, well, the distance. So that is a program that we use to introduce the sport for development. So you're getting, in Trinidad, once people come into the sport of track and field, they think they are sprinters. So everybody wants to sprint. So that when we're talking sport for development, is really, as I say, the fundamentals of the sport, getting people to understand, enjoy the sport while they develop, and get to like and really understand, become a student of the sport, and know what they want about it. And then you have the association taking them through that pathway. So from that level, they graduate into a youth level, where you prepare them into another level before they move over to the seniors. So that in the entries, while I was there, we would have had that kids athletics program. And from the kids athletics program, and they move into the 13 to 17, 13 to 19 age group, we would have started to identify people. And then we have we had a youth program. So we'd have identified persons who we would have put them in a special program. And it was a pilot at the time, so that we identified them, had them in this program, and then, preparing them, because we would have we'd look at some of them and have them identifying to them as podium ready people by 2024. And this is something we had to share with them, so they know why they're there, and what we were doing. So it's not that, I think people recognize that, to be in, and when we did that, we started with just 10 athletes. And it meant that when people recognized what was happening, everybody wanted to get in the program. So people training hard, they want to do good, have good performances, and they want to get it. So that program was being headed by a technical, we call it a technical director, and we had some specific coaches. But the way how we operate in Trinidad and Tobago, coaches tend to keep their athletes as personal. So they wouldn't, unlike football where people get selected into a program or a national team, they will go and work with the national coaches. In track and field, it's very difficult. People very touchy about that. So that we had to modify the program and have the technical director work with the coaches of the athletes, monitor the programs, discuss the programs. Yeah.
Could I chime in, or I want to give Bridget?
No, you anybody, you could go ahead.
There's a small difference from what you're talking about, from my understanding. And in that, sport for development is really where you use sport for transformation of athletes, or transformation of at-risk societies. And it really came out of the United Nations when they talk about the Millennium Development Goals. And when they use sport as a tool to transform at-risk societies. So sport development is probably what you spoke about earlier, in terms of using specific aspects to develop the sport. But sport for development is a bit different. It's using sport as a tool for development of the at-risk society that exists and communities. And this is what's my understanding of it.
All right, well, and I agree with you, but I erred in not explaining fully that that program was actually done in those types of communities. So those were the communities that we were targeting, and even the rural communities, you know. So those are the communities that we were targeting with that program specifically.
All right, Dr. B, you want to chime in a bit?
Certainly. When I looked at it, and I agree with both Mushtaq and Ephraim, and the fundamentals are so important in sport. Where I sit at this point in time, I am not on the executive of the Trinidad and Tobago Netball Association. I am a part of the executive of America's Netball, with the responsibility for all sporting programs, specifically netball in the region. And what we broke it down into that I can speak to is that sport development is separate from sport for development, but they can be interlinked. Sport development, in our view, primarily focus on developing the sport, or more specifically, a certain sport. And this is carried out by international and national federations, as well as umbrella organizations such as the TTOC, the TTVF, entries, and so on, just to name a few. And this involves strategically developing a specific sport or a number of selected sports through investments increased by publicity or other means. This is sport development. And the aim really is to introduce more people to sport, involving them as players, administrators, umpires, referees, fans, sponsors, even advocates. Yes, Mushtaq?
Great.
Let's say, for instance, if a specific sport is successfully promoted, it can lead to more people appreciating the sport, joining in or working as coaches or volunteers, and those will play a positive role in the social well-being of a community. And then if, as Mushtaq says, we are thinking of sport as a tool, then we are speaking of sport for development, which is about generating social development through the use of sport. It works on 3 levels in our opinion: supporting an individual to learn and grow, a community to improve their living conditions, and in the long term, a nation to overcome conflict or its effects. After all, sport is a tool for development. Those who work in the field have the task of demonstrating the efficacy of this tool in comparison with others on the path towards positive social change. Projects carried out in the sport for development field must be based on a firm understanding and knowledge of the sport itself, just as sport for development, sport development. Interventions have to deliver solid sport curricula, and whatever we do in terms of coaching and umpiring, training sessions, we have the physios and we have everybody else, the trainers included. We build skills of participants, teaching them the rules, technical tricks and ways of the game. It must be clear to others that sport itself was the tool that brought about social change. And this can only be the case if done carefully and thoroughly. If organizations merely provided sports equipment, for example, and we are able to provide good, clear, supportive coaching, it would be right to question the value of their work. So sport for development and sport development can work interchangeably. And I agree with both my colleagues who spoke on it before, that we must get the sport for development and sport development right in order to move the sport from point A to point B.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adams. Thank you, Ephraim. Thank you, Mushtaq. Let me take this opportunity to welcome Sonia Johnson, Miss Sonia Johnson, who is joining us this evening. Sonia, welcome. Sonia is a bundle of joy and excitement and passion for sport. And so welcome, Sonia.
Thank you so much. I do apologize for being late. I'm still at a function, but we needed to be here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. So what has come out of the discussion thus far is that we all agree that there's a significant difference between sport development and sport for development. what I pull out from the discussion also is that there's agreement across the board that there's a critical role that all sport administrators need to play as regarding sport development, in terms of the successes of our athletes, in terms of developing various disciplines of sport throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago for that continued success. What we have had in the past recently, and we can refer to it as sporadic success, yes. Why then, or what is the missing link from sport administrators? And this is where we start to get into the real meat of the discussion. What is the missing link? Why do you think our athletes are not continuously successful? Is it something that's missing from our sport administrators or administration? Sonia, you can start.
Okay, so Ian, I was thinking about this when I looked at that particular issue. The question that came to my mind is, what is our vision for our sport, for sport in Trinidad and Tobago? What is the vision that we have for our athletes? I know the TTOC, for example, has its own vision for 20 gold, for example. Yeah, but that's good. But really, what do we want? What is the package that is a Trinidad and Tobago athlete? That, I think, is a question that we need to ask ourselves. And I think that unless we start understanding and have a common kind of narrative, I think that we will continue to having sporadic type performances.
Okay. Ephraim, yes? Ephraim?
Yeah, well, good night, Sonia, and thanks for joining. Always nice to see you. As Sonia mentioned about the TTOC vision of 1024, but TTOC really is our umbrella body for the governing bodies, not for athletes. The governing body fall under TTOC. But I think the sporadic successes is because in the sport, I can speak for track and field, we do not have full control of our athletes. So that we have athletes preparing all in the US. We have few here. For me, I think one of the major concerns when I went into administration, my approach was to be an administrator through the eyes of an athlete. There continues to be a gap between administration and athletes. So the athletes, the administration, the communication between the administrators and the athletes, that was one of the things I tried to bridge. So the smallest child involved in the sport would know who's the president and would be able to approach the president. And that was my approach. And I thought that worked well. Having a lot of workshops, seminars, getting from people what are their goal setting. Because a lot of times people just there, as I was saying, like in the case of the women football, I'm not too sure most of them really interested in that football. The aim is to get a scholarship, but really to represent, so that the gap really is that communication gap between the athletes, the administrators, so that when we don't have that, then, well, I don't want to go into the school system and the whole thing. Sport, as Sonia would say, as was just mentioning, it's not on the curriculum in school. It's extracurricular. So we see it as we growing up, we have time where the school administrators think that sport hinder the performance of athletes with their schoolwork. They have parents like that. They have parents who, before the children born, they study which preschool, which primary school, or which secondary school. So, so we don't have that type of culture that people would want to be involved. For me, I always challenge, in the case of track and field, we used to set targets so that we're looking at the athletes, we're working with them, we're looking at performances across the region and internationally, and we're looking at what athletes need to do. But we work with some people, and you know, most of the athletes who come into sport, the kind of backgrounds they come from, it's very difficult sometimes to get them to focus and understand what this means to them, what it means to Trinidad and Tobago, what it means for their families. So it is always difficult to get that consistency. I mean, you don't get a Usain Bolt every year or a Darrell Brown or that kind of thing. But there are many of them, those similar athletes out there, but we just have to find them. And if we find some of them, then they're interested in something else.
Right. So before I go to Mushtaq and allow Mushtaq and Dr. Bridget Adams to respond, two critical areas and fundamental areas were identified by both Sonia and yourself, Ephraim. In that, Sonia alluded to the fact that many administrators, administrations, and executives of various NGBs do not have a vision for their athletes. You mentioned the fact that there's a communication gap between the administrators and the athletes themselves. Now, taking Sonia's point, many NGBs will say, but here's my strategic plan. My strategic plan has a direct vision as to where I want to see my athlete. And then we go to the point of the communication gap between the athletes and the administrators. But a strategic plan being on a desk is important. But what needs to be done besides just having a strategic plan, which a vision in place? And if there's a gap between administrators and athletes, shouldn't the responsibility be of the administrators to ensure that that gap is bridged? So I want to ask Bridget and Dr. Adams and Mushtaq to respond there. Isn't it the responsibility more so of the administrators? Let's look at the professional clubs. Success on the field, 99% of the times is a mirror reflection of what happens in the boardroom. So the players are comfortable, the athletes are comfortable, they go out and they produce because there's comfort coming from the boardroom and the board of management. Why is there that gap in communication? Why is there still that strategic plan that's on the desk but not being implemented? Mushtaq, Dr. Adams.
Go first, Doc. Ladies first.
Mushtaq said ladies first, Dr. Adams.
Sorry, I was muted. I understand quite clearly the question, and generally, yes, more can be done differently. And why do we do a 4-year or maybe 5-year strategic plan and put it on the shelf and not work with it? Culturally, we are a small community of athletes and administrators, and we tend to personalize issues that should be looked at objectively. And the sport administrators will have to demonstrate objectivity by their action regardless of the situation. Then there will be more trust and buy-in to your vision and your strat plan. Without a vision, our people will perish. Unlike major countries, we have to blaze the trail by leading from in front. For example, an executive has members in certain positions and they do not work. As sport administrators, that cannot work. And we have to plan what we are going to do because there is only 24 hours in a day. And there must be proper planning to execute and mentally see through what you want to do in terms of your strat plan. The vision is to start, the results is the end, and the work is between there. You put in the work, which will make the vision a reality in terms of the results, of which the administrators and the athletes should benefit. Yes? Now, it is written, the head may devise and the heart may conceive in vain if the hands be not prompt to execute the design. In short, we have to put into practice and do the work. We may come up with great ideas, and if the work is not done or put into action, it becomes a festering idea. So do not put your strat plans on the shelf. Work from it. This is your plan for the next 4 years. Avoid the gaps. Avoid what will happen between player and administration and how you plan to execute going forward the vision of the organization. That's my contribution.
Thank you very much, Doc. Mushtaq.
I don't think I have anything to add. You know, but I see a little bit deeper than that, because and Bridget talked about two things there, and my friend talked about the gaps. But why are there gaps, and who construct the strat plan? Strat plan is probably, I'm saying probably, was conducted or constructed by a group of people or executive members, whatever, and not really all the stakeholders. So you get a strat plan that is based on an executive group who has an idea, but the people, the one who it involves, did not get an input, so that they are not binding to that strat plan. That is one problem. So it's difficult to execute. Secondly, I want to go a bit deeper or further. We in Trinidad and Tobago, we don't have a sporting culture. If we have a sporting culture, and sport is an important industry in Trinidad and Tobago, then you would find that we will all have a model that's we want to conform with. We have a model that we will want to achieve success. Ephraim said it's sporadic. Why it is sporadic? Because somebody might invest in an athlete, or somebody, it might have an athlete with natural talent and they develop. But it is not strategic. We are not into long-term athlete development. We are not into identifying skill set. I might come from volleyball. I want my son to play volleyball, but my children, biomechanics, is as good swimmers. So nobody at the school level, at the primary school level, at the secondary school level, where it is important to identify strategically the athletes that must go towards specific sport. They go into a sport, they are directed because, as Ephraim said, I want a scholarship, so I want to play some football. But they're great talent, they could jump real high. They could probably play netball better than they could play football. So we don't have a culture for sport. We don't have a systematic system so that we can direct athletes where it should be. In terms of sport administrators, we select sport administrators based on friendship, not based on who can do the job. We have sport administrators like a coach. A good athlete is not a coach, but a good athlete can become a coach if he's trained properly how to be a coach. Similarly, who are the administrators? Former athletes, a parent. You have in organizations that we have a treasurer who knows nothing about finance and management of money. Or you have a leader of an association that is, I don't want to say an Ephraim, because Ephraim has management skills, right? And that is why you would see the success of National Athletic Association, because Ephraim has management skills coupled with his athletic skills. So he has the passion and he has the qualification. How many of us have that in our national associations? How many of us? And this, we have, and I could even go further back. So I'm talking about the administrators who are there, can't do the job. Sorry. They want to do the job, but they can't do the job. And we have a sport policy, I'm sorry, not a sport policy, we have a sporting culture. And where does a culture come from? We have to develop it. It has to be, and I'm not saying, it has to be government driven. It has to be national driven. Nationally, we must drive that. Any and not only Trinidad and Tobago, I love Trinidad and Tobago, but any third world country, a government has a budget deficit. What get the damage? Sport, culture, the arts. They have not seen the importance of sport in development of a society. Nelson Mandela said it quite well. Sport has the power to do many things. The power to change, the power to inspire, the power to unite people, the power to transform people. But what do? Our Prime Minister just described Trinidad and Tobago as a what kind of society? I wouldn't say. But yes, it is. But what can transform that? Sport. But it is not sport as a pick up and go. It has to be sport that is structured. It has to be sport that has an attraction. Our athletes must be attracted to want to become sporting heroes. Sorry I went this long, but I have a real.
Woodstock. I realize it's at a point there, but I want to agree with you when you say passion. If you don't have that passion, you're really out of it. And I could attest to that because when you're leading and trying to bridge that gap, communicating with the athletes, understanding, even with the strategic plan, the survey, including the coaches and the clubs were included, but the responses from them was like minimum. They didn't see, like a first time or some kind of thing. So they didn't see the importance of contributing, not recognizing how it is for what role they would have been playing because it is for them, So that, yes, I'm not sure I could speak from the NGA side because the consultant we would have worked with, we engaged the clubs before, in working to get the plan done, even with setting the targets and all these kind of things. So that you're quite right with what you're saying, and it has to start from the government. I mean, when you look at when a budget is read, I mean, budget really don't mean we have any money. It's just an estimate, a guesstimate kind of thing. But when you look at if you look at it as a pie, the smallest amount of the smallest part of that pie is for sport and culture. But yet when we travel, people ask you about Brian Lara, Dwight York, Casey Crawford, Atto Bolden, Marcel Montano. Those are the people who sell in the country outside there. Precisely. But the investment is, I have traveled extensively. Nobody never asked me about no prime minister, nobody from Trinidad. Trinidad and Tobago, Brian Lara, Marcel Montano, that's the names. Yeah, these are the people who marketing and putting Trinidad on the map. But the funding for arts, culture, sport is the smallest.
And from you made an important point there, and it's something like I like to allude to saying. I always say that the country's greatest billboard is an athlete. No two ways about it. From now till whenever generation, people will speak about Michael Jordan. They will speak about Magic Johnson from the US. They will speak about Brian Lara, Sachin Tendulkar. But if you ask persons, and I did this sometimes with some of our initiation for our new students in UTT, I asked who was the second prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and persons are stuttering. So a country's greatest billboard is an athlete. That's correct. Yeah. But we are still fortunate in Trinidad and Tobago. So coming out of the discussion, and I want to pose this question to Sonia to start the discussion on this. We are still fortunate to an extent in Trinidad and Tobago where we have funding that's given to the sporting association by the government of Trinidad and Tobago, no matter how small it is. No matter how minuscule it is. There are other countries who just don't get funding from their governments. We still do. Is it then an indictment? Would you say it's an indictment on sport administration? We just identified that the success of our athletes depend a lot on that buy-in from the athletes to our strategic plan, to our goals, to our vision. So that communication gap that needs to be bridged. Is it then an indictment on our sport administrators when we have limited, not even sporadic success, but limited or no success at all? when these administrators are still given some level of support by the government? Sonia?
Now, I do tend to agree that the sport administrators do play a major role, but I think it's such a complex issue, and I don't know if it's just about funding. Of course, Mustafa and so on before, and other people mentioned capacity and so on, culture and so on. So again, I go back. I will always go back. I might sound like a stuck record. What is the vision that we see for the sport? I know a lot of the conversations on what we may do individually in our sporting disciplines, but for me, I want to look at it as an entire ecosystem. Yeah, I think until we look at it like that, we will then see what roles we have to play to make that happen. Because sometimes if we do things just in silos, we don't get the responses. So all of us can have some money, right? But if we were to pool the resources in a smart way, maybe we may be able to achieve some of what it is that we intend. But we need to understand, what do we intend to achieve, right? So I like to look at things a little more fundamentally and not just on the surface. So I think it depends on what, again, going back, was the overarching vision for sport as a country, and then how we as individual NSOs fit into that, and how could we leverage our collective resources, not just financial, collective, technical, administrative, whatever it is, to make sure we have an ecosystem that not just works for one sport, but works for all.
Thank you, Sonia.
Yeah,
Yes?
Yeah, I wanna just talk about that funding thing a little bit. And I want to bring an example, and was a really good strategy that was done when we started the sport company. When the government implemented the sport company, before the sport company was implemented, there was a study that was done by the Australian Sport Academy.
Institute of Sport, yeah.
Institute of Sport, right? And we tried to follow that, what they were doing. And we went into many road bumps because they told us we should do 5 or 6 different sports and make it podium ready. Because these 5 or 6 different sports are the potential for our podiums. And as they have that potential, we should invest in it a lot. It's the same model Australia used when they were heading to the Olympics in 2000. From 1980 to 1996, Australia invested almost $1 billion, $920 million in their sport development area. And during that period in 1996, they won 115 medals, of which I remember 25 was gold medals. And if you do the maths, it costs 25, that'll be about 37 million per gold medal. And if you go to say 115 medals, it will probably go down to about 8 million per medal. But for gold medal, if you were to say from a statistical point of view, $35 million was invested to get a gold medal. So, and we started something, but our problem here is this. We're sporadic. We don't monitor and evaluate. We don't do any, as you said, we go back again, as Sonia was saying, the vision, and follow that vision that we have. If it's the TTOC that they say 10 to 24, 10 gold medal by 2024, that is a good vision. But what are we doing to achieve it? Did we sit down and recognize where this 10 goal going to come from? I'm not criticizing the TTOC. I'm just using an example. And say, look, the potential for these 10 goals are purely out of the athletic department. Or maybe athletic and cycling. Or probably athletic, cycling, and boxing, let's say. And that 10 goals we want to achieve, we invest in it financially, administratively, and all the strategies that is necessary to get it. but we left it up to somebody to carry out that mission of 1024. Where it's going to come from, nobody identified where that 10 goals going to come from. So we did not put any of our strategy behind it to achieve it. And it includes funding the administrative. Today, sorry, I will make this example. And it was very, very nice example. In the cricket today, I was watching IPL and I saw the Titans captains talk about, and something that Ephraim was talking also about. And when he said he complimented, and they were keeping winning right now, they're at the top of the table. And one of his comment, he complimented more than once, twice, three times the staff. The staff is associated with the team, how strategic they were in removing all the pressures from the athlete. And they were the ones who are, and that is what they attributed to their success of constantly winning. So we need to be, as I say, having a goal, as Bridget talked about it, the strategic plan on the shelf. But who is checking the strategic plan every 3 months, every 6 months? Where are we? Have we reached? Have we achieved based on the action plan, the timelines? Are we reaching our goals and objectives, or do we have to retool it? But while I'm talking about this, I just got a message, and some of the people who are looking on want to put some questions on the chat, but I don't know if Gansham can help us. They say that they are saying that they cannot put a question except if they subscribe. I'm not too sure if that is a requirement.
I don't think it is. They can be able to put questions on the YouTube platform. We have had some questions coming in, but Gransham has said that is true. So I guess persons will have to subscribe,
yeah,
and then type in their questions.
Okay, but some people don't, yeah.
Mushtaq, as you
before you go, Ian, I
yes.
agree with, I want to agree with Mushtaq, but one of the key things is developing the environment. Sport is big business, and if I could share a little that worked for me is that I approach this as a business, set targets, develop products. So I had products that I would have developed to sell. So my mission, and it's a vision that I would have shared with the board at the time. My first vision was to have constitutional reform, because I inherited a board with 17 people, rail baggage, right? While the constitution wasn't bad, but it would serve this time, a lot would have changed. So I will struggle with that, but we end up having it. But the thing is understanding the business of the sport, not depending wholly and solely on government. So you develop an environment, you develop products for sale, right? So that, and I'll share this with you all. So we have a contract with Puma for apparels and these things, right? So when I was negotiating that contract, was the same morning of the heats for the 100 meters in the 2016 Olympics. So the meeting was held after lunch. You know what's the introduction to that meeting? My plans for negotiation was at 5 million. I had to back down because the introduction to the meeting was, your guys didn't do so good today. But not a man made it past the first round. Not a man made it past the first round. So, and artists have to understand that we get that into them. If they don't perform, we have nothing to sell. We have nothing to sell. So we have to work with them. And that's how I build that relationship with the athletes, even the younger ones. At a certain stage, athletes would meet me during the year. So that Untitled Chapter not leaving without me. We're winning a gold medal. And he used to ask me, how you getting these children to do that? Because you're working with them and you're letting them know, this is what we have to do. This is what we're looking for. This is not I should say to them all the time, stage 1 is selected on the team. Stage 2, get into a final. Stage 3, podium. So I worked that with them right through, and it worked. It worked. There's not everybody, but some of them would have taken it. But we have to understand the business of the sport and create the environment. If you go into the NGA's office now, I don't know if you ever went to visit the NGA's office.
Yes, I think we got at
right, right. When you enter, what do you meet when you enter there? The floor is a track. The floor in the office is a track. So the office staff know they work in sport. Television have to be on sport. Not no young and restless and nowhere. It's sport. They have to know it's sport. You understand? So you have to create that environment. You have to create the environment. People have to understand what they are and what they're contributing to and celebrate in the results.
All right. Dr. Adams, you want to add at all? Or?
Yes, so I was thinking, yes, Ephraim, that is all well and good, but who is going to empower the coaches? Who is going to empower the sport administrators to get the job done? Because a key aspect of gauging the level of sport development is the existence of funding and financial arrangements. And that must detail how sport will be financed. You cannot produce teams and not put the adequate amount of funding into performance to get the desired results and expect the same thing. No, you have to invest. And this is a role that is mostly held by the Sport Ministry and the Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago. And they're charged with the responsibility for sport and in other instances, the statutory bodies or institutes established to facilitate policy implementation. In some cases, it is a joint responsibility of the ministry and the statutory bodies. Without a system or policy articulating just how sporting activities will be transacted, none of the subcomponents would have any incentive to focus on or guided by the national mandate. And the key issues remain. What is to be funded? How is it to be funded? Procedures receiving or accessing funding and the reporting requirements associated in obtaining funding. So we have to empower our sport administrators, our coaches, our technical staff in order to deliver the requisite results.
And that's correct. That's so true, Bridget. And what
it is very, very true, very true.
Yeah. But what I want to allude to is that sometimes, and not sometimes, but most times, our administrators need to take the opportunities that are placed before them with both hands. And I can allude and attest to the fact that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee has started, not started, but I would say that they continue along the lines of empowering and engaging sport administrators in educational programs and in building capacity. But how many of our administrators take that on as a tool that could help them in the delivery of their duties as an administrator? So we go back to the old adage that you play the sport, you was involved in the sport, you become the president, and then you hold on to that position for years upon years upon years, but without any real evidence of performance, because you are not enhancing your ability to perform the responsibility as president, vice president, treasurer, whatever. And there are courses at our disposal by the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, which I must say has been doing a tremendous job. I give kudos to that. As a matter of fact, some of our discussions that we're having here is based on that kind of partnership between both the University of Trinidad and Tobago and the TTOC. And I know of other institutions that have been joining with the TTOC in that regard. However, there needs to come a time that it must be, maybe, maybe the word mandate is maybe too strong, but that there should be some level of growth within the organization or a level of that success from the organization over the 5-year period to ensure that there's continuity in terms of funding for the associations. Because why are we demanding, and in some cases, we really demanding that we need funding, we need funding, we need funding. But what is that funding going into? How are our athletes performing? And I must say, the next question is going to be a tough one. And Ephraim, Mushtaq, Dr. Adams, and Sonia, I know that you have all, Ephraim, you alluded to, travel the world over. And there is the belief that people join these organizations, sit in these positions, jacket and tie, because there's going to be a free trip many years. But
Well,
where is the level of accountability?
Thank you,
The
Ian.
level of performance that shows that I am doing an excellent job. And I know in some cases in volleyball, we have had excellent performances, and maybe I should have thrown in one administrator from a discipline of sport who has not been performing as well as these four. But there is the notion and belief that people join these organizations because there's a free trip around the corner.
Ian,
I
I have
have
a
a
question.
if I can,
Last statement.
before you go, Mama Stack, if I can
No,
say,
I tell him, I don't have a question. I just
But
statement.
that's a
It's a
statement.
fact.
It's a statement of fact.
yeah,
It's a fact.
no,
The question, however, Ephraim, before is
yeah.
what measurement tools are used for accountability of these
Thank you.
associations, of
Thank
these
you.
All right.
administrators?
All right. So if I can go, well, in my case, I can say people used to ask me how come a team going and I'm still here, because that was never for me. That was never for me. If the ones that I would have had to go to would be ones that I had to take part in a congress or some kind of thing. But the thing is, as I said before, this thing is business. And Mustak would have alluded to it earlier, where we just, friends and that kind of thing. We try to, for me, I try to surround myself with people with various skill sets. So it was not just about me. So you have people who you could delegate things to. But saying that if it is delegated and not done, I will get it done, right? But you have people with skill sets. And the thing is, as I say, my measurement, that is my forte, measure results. So we always visit looking at what we said that was going to be done, by what time, and we'll revisit to say, looking at it, monitoring it until we recognize whether or not we are on track to achieve it, or what has been hindering it, and whether we need to change that target or whatever it is. But it is something that it is not easy. It is not easily done. It is a lot of work. People think when you be a president or executive member, I mean, for me, it was not easy. And worse yet, it was free work. For me, it was give back. A lot of people didn't understand. People feel that being a president of the NGAs was a paying job. Even the minister, there's no pay. For me, it was passion, giving back to the sport that would have given to me. Even going in your own pocket to help out.
Ephraim and Musta, before you go, I want to engage Sonia to respond here, because she has to leave us in a short while. Sonia.
Thank you so much, Ian. And I really wanted to weigh in on this in particular. Because you see, the whole concept of accountability, when you were talking, I didn't know what else to say. I had to really sit down and keep myself calm, right? Because I think that is where we fall short. You mentioned the TTOC does a lot of programs, fabulous programs. I fully agree. But I think some of what is missing is what is the follow-up. So we've done this, we've empowered in terms of sharing some knowledge, some know-how, some best practices. How are we following up? Because guess what? We're badgering a little bit the sport administrators, and in some cases justified, right? But sometimes some people, besides just getting the tools, they need how, what is the approach? What is my next step? What is my step after that? What are the things or procedures that we have in place to support those sport administrators, especially those that are well-intentioned? Okay, so we equip. Okay, fine, I have all the knowledge. I could write my plan, I could engage. Okay, then what? What do I do next? And sometimes people don't know. Let's be real, some people just don't know. I mean, of course, you could make the arguments whether they're well-suited, but maybe they could be just a leader in training. So we need to understand where people are at, but we could only do that when we have proper monitoring and evaluation systems. So once we've equipped people, what do we do next with them to make sure that they grow? And if they're not willing to, then the evaluation process will pick that up. So to me, it's a systemic issue. So that is why I keep on saying, let's start with the Bridget Stuck record again. starting with there, if we knew this is where we want to go, we need a certain kind of people to deliver that. And in order to get that level of people, we need to equip them with the skills and an sporting infrastructure that will allow them to be successful.
Thank you for that passionate response, Sonia.
Thanks, Ian.
Yes, Mushtaq.
Yeah. No, both Ephraim and Sonia said something that is important in terms of the environment. Just like Ephraim, everybody thought I was a sport professional. Nobody knew I was a teacher. I taught for 25 years. And anywhere they thought I was being paid to do president or secretary, whatever. And we talk about it, and yes, we are bashing sport administrators, and most of them are there because they're doing it well. If they get a travel ticket, hey, they work damn hard for it. They work hard. They invest their free time, their family time, and everybody. But some of them got travel ticket, not justified. Yes, okay. But what we are asking for is a professional environment in a voluntary framework. We cannot expect somebody to do an 8 to 4, 40-hour work week as a volunteer. We need to decide that, Ephraim, I don't know, but you may have 1 or 2 staff. Volleyball never had a paid staff. Cricket might have a few. I know, but we don't have paid staffs. We do it out of our pocket. Traveling to meetings internally, we go up and down Port of Spain to San Fernando. I live in San Fernando. Making all the phone calls or whatever, taking your time from your family to do it. I did it. I started in sport as a novice, not knowing about administration. I got involved in it, and I invested I had a passion and a commitment for it. And that is how we did it. And that is how I go from one to the next. Yes, there.
Sorry, so Mushtaq, are you saying that because you can afford to pay out of your own pocket, that you can pay to be a part of the technical team to go on tour with any of your teams? Or can you not pay from your pocket and go as a spectator? Because sometimes...
No, not that. No, I'm talking about managing the association.
Okay.
No, I'm talking about managing the association.
You shift it a little bit. Okay, cool.
Yeah. To manage the association. No, what I'm saying, if you are managing the association voluntarily and a trip come up, who is best should go?
The person best suited for the role that has to be played.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. But I mean,
and that may not necessarily be the administrator who is giving freely.
But the person who's doing the administration and making sure everything is in place has positioned the national team or whatever in such a situation so that they could benefit. But there are many arguments about it, right? But what I'm saying, yes, Ian, what you have said was fact, that some people are there for the trip. Some people are there for the limelight. Some people are there for the PR. Not all of them. But I'm saying, hey, we are trying to do a professional work with a voluntary environment. We are all volunteers. Okay?
Well said.
Hence, how do you expect that somebody who's a volunteer to meet a deadline, to fill out a form, to do a document, to invest their time, effort, and energy? I remember the first time I joined the Olympic Committee, and the Walker from the chairman of Whitco then, Audley Walker, I think it was. He came and told us, the first time I joined the Olympic Committee, inauguration ceremony, he told the entire executive, from today, you are no longer a volunteer because you agreed to accept to serve on the committee, the Olympic Committee, knowing what you're going to get involved in. Hence, you are going to do what you have to do that is required of you, knowing that you are going to do it voluntarily. Not all of us could do that. Not all of us has the passion to do that.
Agreed, Mushtaq. Yes.
All right, so let me entertain. Yeah, go ahead.
I agree with Mushtaq on that, and that's why those are some of the things that drove me in my constitutional reform to restructure so that Entries is now set up in a way in a business, so we have accountant, we have a chief administrative officer, you know. So what I was able to do is to separate duties, because the secretary at the time used to be the person managing the office and that kind of thing, and then on board meetings. So we were able to separate that, you know. The secretary is on the board, and you have a administrator.
Sorry, you're able to do that because you got the funding through your sponsorship and your success and all that.
Well, yeah, but
9 out of 10 cannot do that.
Well, that was because of and I should say, these are things, those were the things that I went and sell, right? Now, when I made my presentation, the first sponsorship I got was for 15 million MOU for 3 years. And when I did the presentation, one of the board members from the organization stood up and he said he understand what we were going through. And he used that term, and I never forget this. He said, you all were hemorrhaging. He said, because when you understand how we operating, you understand? And you know, it's that passion. You really want to get this thing done. And that's why I said to the president earlier, anybody who I meet and they shake my hand and tell me how they admire what they're doing, it's come at a cost, because I'm going to ask you for something. I'm going to ask you for something. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and I just want to remind you there's some questions. I don't know.
Yes, so yes. So I want to entertain some questions from our participants. We have a question that says, if you could run through the answers, the responses to these questions as quickly as possible. We may take one person responding to each. It says, is sport for development really reaching those that it is intended to reach? Do we believe that sport for development is really reaching those that it's intended to reach? Mushtaq, you want to take that question quickly? Or Sonia? Sonia?
No, the question is no. The answer is no. Quick,
Sonia?
No. I mean, because
I want to, if that's okay.
Sure. Go ahead.
So, again, stuck record. In the case of sport for development, the question then lies, what is the vision we have for the citizens? Okay? And then what is the role that sport plays in that vision for the citizen? I do think in some cases, and I could speak for chess, that one of the things we're doing, for example, is that we work highly in the prison service, right? Because again, the sport for development. This is the plan that we had. We felt that we could save generations by working within the prison service. Do we do all that we think we need to do? No. But do we have some successes? Yes, we do. Does that help spur us on to do more? Yes, it does. Okay, so I think it depends, but we had a vision in terms of what we saw that chess could help. And it's not just making the prisoners smart. It's about their children and their families and the people they're connected to. Yeah, so that's how we saw. Again, let's always go from the top. Once you understand where it is you want to go, then you put certain things and activities in place to get there. Okay, so I do think that there's some that it is helping, maybe not on the scale that we would like, but we need also to celebrate the successes. And I want to thank you, Ian, for having me, because you know now on my last.
Yes.
But I had to be here because of the invitation. Thank you. And everybody allowed me to be here with you. Thank you so much for this and with this esteemed panel. Sorry, I can't be there to answer more questions, but of course, we could always do this again if need be. Yeah, yes. I'm more than happy. But thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Sonia, and all the best as you continue to lead the Trinidad and Tobago Chess Association towards the successes that we have realized thus far and the successes that come. UTT's Chess Club is going to continue to support chess in Trinidad and Tobago. One of our junior athletes, 10-year-old, was the
under 10 female champion. I saw that.
Yes, well, thanks a lot. All right.
No problem.
Yeah, I just want to echo. Sonia, I just want to say to you and all, because I follow your program on the prison, and it was fantastic program.
Thank you so much. It means so much coming from my peers, because as you said, we are volunteers and this is hard, but we know it's important work. And when we get comments like that from you, we are encouraged to continue. Thank you.
Okay, so Sonia, thanks a lot. Have a good evening.
Okay, bye. Bye,
I want to
guys.
throw this question at Dr. Adams. We spoke about sport. We spoke extensively about sport as a business. Ephraim alluded to it a lot. In 2011, a study by A.T. Kearney indicated that sport at that point in time, 2011, was considered 480 to 600 billion US dollar industry. That's 2011. What are we as sport administrators? And I say we, because all the bashing I was bashing sport administrators, I have to put myself in the same kettle and ask myself, what are my indicators as well of success as an administrator? But what are we as sport administrators in TNT doing to make sport a financially viable and sustainable thing?
All right. Sport administrators must provide the opportunities to ensure the success that they want to see and achieve. More international exposure for teams and athletes will be highly recommended to measure their level of preparedness, and this will come at an expense or cost to the organization. We can train and practice as much as we like at home against local opponents. But when our athletes enter competition, they will not be participating against local opponents. It will be against international opponents. There must be all-round support for athletes and teams, and this support must be financially feasible. Fundraisers can only go part of the way. Government subvention is good, but corporate Trinidad and Tobago must assist as well. Marketing is one of the aspects that we look at in terms of getting the sport out there to attract the level of sponsorship that we would like. After all, when our athletes do well, all of Trinidad and Tobago rejoice. So corporate citizens must get involved in some form of sponsorship per sport, because the amount of businesses we have in Trinidad and Tobago outweigh the disciplines of sport in the country. So a little will go a long way. Tambourine ball, sugar cake, tulum, barbecue, curry cue must be sold to acquire funding and go on at those days. So we need to be involved in a heavy marketing strategy in order to attract the necessary funding to take our teams further.
Correct. Thank you very much, Dr.
So
Adams.
if I just want to, the corporate citizens, they get involved, when the athletes win, in
Exactly.
ambush marketing. So they go advertising, congratulating them and using the image for free.
Yeah, exactly.
But I want to add to what Bridget said. I want to throw this at Mushtaq as well and ask the question of Mushtaq. Ephraim alluded to it as well, because when he went to do his presentation in 2016, the product that he was going to present was not successful on that day. Sponsors and partners like to associate themselves with winners, with a product that can help to sell the image of their company. That's without a question. Mushtaq, in your time as president of Trinidad and Tobago Volleyball Federation, and even as your time as in the international arena, how was it marketed, or how was volleyball marketed to encourage sponsorship and partnerships with corporate TNT or corporate persons within the world?
Yeah, and that was the most difficult thing we had to do. And you asked for volleyball, so I'll stay volleyball specific. We were considered a minor sport. So volleyball was considered a minor sport. However, what we recognized, or at that point in time, when we got involved, that if volleyball were to be successful, there was no school development program. There were no schools program. So in 1990 onwards, we started up a really top school program. And we look for, as in any good marketing plan, we look for what product you have to sell and how you're going to sell that product. What we identified at that time was that volleyball was probably best, if I would say so, family sport. And it was a non-contact sport. So family members, parents were willing to allow their children to participate in it. And we started selling that through the schools. We got support, and we started giving equipment. We got equipment to schools. And we just give volleyballs to schools throughout. Primary schools, we had primary schools, and we call what we call a mini volleyball program. And we didn't care if they kick the ball, they throw the ball, they play cricket with the ball, whatever. But you know what? In the lips of the kids, the young kids, the 10 years, the 8-year-old, they were playing with a volleyball. And that's what they lived. That's what they knew. A volleyball. They didn't, whatever they were doing. And when they transformed from primary school to secondary school, they knew about volleyball because they played with a volleyball. And then when the PE program in the secondary school started, they gravitated towards volleyball. And hence, within a short space of time, we had a massive school program and a primary school program. And that was our product that we sold. And we identify who are we going to sell this to? And we sell it to the banks, because we told the bank, look, hey, we have a certain number of kids, over 100 primary schools and secondary schools playing sport. They give each child a $5 account. But that child who got the $5 account, you know what happened? When he became a senior, he probably still stay faithful to that bank. And that was the marketing tool that we used to get the bank to come and join us. I won't call the name of the bank. We got a beverage company who was promoting a new product and it was geared towards kids. They come on board. And this is what we were strategic. We knew that, look, it's about kids. And after that, in 2007, by between 1990 and 2007, that's about 17 years, it took us, and we had a massive program that really was similar to the intercall for football. We had the intercall for volleyball. That was the product that we sold, and another thing that we offered was scholarship for kids. We didn't offer it, but we knew it was available. And netball started to complain because the kids were coming to us, the taller ones, because they're getting scholarships in the United States. And we take away all the tall young athletes who had exited secondary school, and they will get, sometimes we get 35, 40 scholarships for athletes. So that was attractive. So we started to grow. And then the advent of the sport company, we went in strategically and we started getting support, because I told you about that Australia program, there were 5 sports, we were number 6. And we came in because we were hitting the podium. Caribbean Championships, we were hitting the podium regularly, so they included us. And what happened? 10 years after 2007, we qualified for the World Championships. So it was a strategic move to do that. But we had to do it properly. And we didn't have the full support of the corporate environment. But if a sport has to get the eye of a corporate environment, they need to have a product to sell. And they need to know how to sell that product. They don't come there. Yes, Bridget, we have a lot of corporate people there. Yes, some of them jump on the bandwagon when it's late. But when you go to them and you say, some of us go for a donation. We don't go for a partnership. We must go for a partnership. Because with a partnership, like Ephraim said, he got 15 million. You know, you said about the industry of sport in 2011, in 2018, my latest research I did, it grew from 300 billion to 800 billion in 2018. And now it's bordering on $1 trillion, the sport industry. Another thing that is really, really massive all around the world, but not in Trinidad, and we have the facilities, we have the ability, sports tourism. Big time. CPL is doing something for us in sports tourism. but we must know how to translate that into other sports, athletics, swimming, what we have, the mega type of buildings to suit it. So this is, I hope I answer your question well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You did. And I think that all our panelists will agree that in order to maximize the benefit of partnerships and sponsorships and not donations, we need to develop the product. And that's where sport development and athlete performance comes into play. And that's where in every sport administration strategic plan, there should be an athlete development pathway that would lead down the road, as you explained so excellently, the pathway that led to the success of volleyball 10 to 11 years later. It's not going to work overnight. It's not going to work overnight. So let me just entertain.
Yeah, that's one thing that you just said there. Well, we started with the raffle, no? And we started with the barbecue.
And the barbecue,
no,
correct?
Seriously.
Correct, yes, yes.
Because at that time, we could not have attracted a sponsor.
Correct, because you have to
We
develop
started with the raffle and the barbecue and the car wash and the this and the that.
Yes.
And we had committed people to do it.
All right. I have a question from Professor James Krause, who's looking on. He asks, does coaching sports, and this is directed to Ephraim, does coaching sports as a business conflict with the fundamentals, capital FUN?
I wouldn't say that. Because all our athletes who are performing at the elite and top level, they're in programs where they have to pay for coaching. These are coaches who understand what they are doing. They would have had successful athletes under the program. So I don't really think that is something that would conflict, something that I would say would conflict with the sport. So that's where we're going now. I mean, the people are building programs, clubs, and I mean, they may not be paying coaching fees, but they have different dues and whatnot and all these things, and that's what it goes to. It goes towards the coaching fees.
All right, wonderful.
Ian, can I ask Ephraim something there quickly? Ephraim,
yes, certainly.
Where do you have your best coaches? Or where should the best coaches be? Not at the beginning stages so that they do the right thing?
Yeah.
Right. So our best coach is supposed to be at that level.
Supposed to be.
Yep. Supposed to be.
So I have to. Okay, Dr. Adams, go ahead.
What I would say to that question, there are two different levels. Fundamental is for the juniors, and you have the elite level that you will attract, a different audience. So it will be two different levels on which you have to gauge that question on. Yeah.
All right. So I have a comment and two questions. We have about 9 minutes before we wrap up. So I have a comment that says, I think we need to critically look at the role of volunteerism and its effects. Is it doing sports are good or bad? Let's be real. We cannot want to commercialize sports with volunteers. And that supports the point that Mushtaq was making. This comment comes from as far as Guayari. Bridget, close to you?
Yeah. I know the guy. I know him. Jameson.
Yes, a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And it's so true. True. If we really want to ensure that sport, we get a piece of the pie of that $800 billion US sport industry, then we have to take sport and treat it as a business and not just as fun and games and play. All right.
Agreed.
I have a question here. And I throw this one first at Dr. Adams, but I'll allow for every member of the panel to answer this one, but give your answers as quickly as possible, as brief as possible. Will administration of sport be brave enough to sacrifice participating in international tournaments and competitions and concentrate on meaningful development?
Right. It all depends. Yeah, it all depends on if you have agreed sometime to participate in a particular event. Sometimes you have to agree 2 years or a year before. There could be consequences to that, penalties, there could be sanctions and so on. So one has to be careful exactly what they would like to do and make that decision very, very early to know if my team is ready for that competition, or should I not enter this competition and prepare a team to get there in the next 4 years? Yeah.
All right. Ephraim Mushtaq.
Well, I agree with Doc. You know, the thing is, sometimes there may be sanctions, and you know that may happen. That you know could cause the association to be debarred from competing in the future and that kind of thing. But the thing is that you must okay, if I use track and field as an example, the Carifta Games, there's no standard to qualify for Carifta Games. Unlike the World Championship where there are sets, you must do a qualifying standard. But we in Trinidad and Tobago set a standard. We set a standard so that, to gauge for people, every year they would look at the performances over the last 5 years and come with a standard, develop a standard so that athletes have to achieve that standard in order to go. So it's not that, yes, we see Carifta as development, but it's not that you're just carrying people for carrying them sake.
Yeah. You cannot forsake it, international event or even a regional event, because this is where you measure your athletes' performance. You're playing at home and you winning. You're your national team. You could play against the best clubs and whatever, but you winning. But when you go outside, it's a different competition. It's a different environment. It's a different psyche for the athletes. So you really can't forsake it. You may be strategic. You might not go to all, but you will definitely have to go to some.
But is it then that we all agree that the timing that agreement is given to the international bodies of our participation should give us sufficient time, does give us sufficient time to prepare for such a tournament, and not go to the tournaments without proper preparation?
Yeah. All. I mean, from our perspective, all athletes, all international calendars are there 2 and 3 years before, so you know what you have to do. But again, I have seen teams reach in the airport and then get a uniform, and then get a ticket, So it again, you promise funding, how you get the funding, when you get it. This conversation we're having today will take 2 months to end, and we won't finish.
And Mushtaq, I agree with you that sometimes you request the funding, you don't get the funding in time, and you reach the airport, then you get the ticket. But then let me be devil's advocate here. There are situations where the funding is requested a week before, and then the noise is made that
I can tell you about that. But the entries was very fortunate in that although they would have sent in timely requests, there was funds that they would have been able to use and be reimbursed and that kind of thing. And that's one of the good things through the sponsorships and that kind of thing, that we were able to not be in a case. Because I always, as I said, I approach my administration duties through the eyes of an athlete. I was, as Mushtaq indicated, I was a part of a team as a junior, and in the airport, people have to go back home. Those are the days we used to get uniform in a box, and when we come back from the competition, we have to put it back. I said that is not going to happen under my watch. I take pleasure when teams are selected and they get this last Carifta appearance, and they didn't know it's all this get a whole bag with all. I watching the competition on television. I say, look at some of them. They don't even know what to wear. They don't even first they have uniform. They don't even know what to wear.
All right. One more question. It's now 8:57. So after this question, we each panelist will make closing remarks. So we have a policy on sport, and if my recollection serves me right, there was consultation with the NGBs and with sports stakeholders in developing this new policy on sport. So the policy on sport, we were part of the conversation. A question by one of our participants indicates, this is Jameson Reed, is it necessary, or do we think it's necessary to have a coordinated national conversation that brings sporting administrators in line with a strategic objective for sport? So this is a national conversation for all sporting administrators, coordinated to bring all administrators in line with a strategic objective for sport. Responses?
I see like they want to go, boy. Time running out, you know.
Yes.
Yes, it is. But I'll tell you something, we are too insular. You know, and I have no discredit to entries, netball, volleyball, or whatever. But we're too insular. We about us. We wouldn't sit down because it doesn't affect me. That don't affect me. You know, I just do my thing. I just have our administration good. I have a good strategic plan. I have my constitution. I have my audited financial statement. I have this. I have that. I have sponsor. So it don't affect me. I'm not coming. The others now, the smaller ones who fighting to survive, need unity. We need unity. We need. Hey, internationally there's the IOC, but you know there is a Association of National Olympic Committee separate and apart from the IOC. Why? Because there is a need to come together to advocate differently. So yes, we need to come together as the administrators, the Ephraim and the Bridget and the Mushtaq and the Sonia, all of us and all the other federation presidents need to come together, be stronger together, so we can advocate together and we can share our skill sets and our challenges so we'll know how to solve problems. We do need it, definitely.
Thank you, Mushtaq. Dr. Adams?
Yeah. Just as any type of construction or development, it requires detailed plans. So too does sport development, sport administrators, and so on. The various components that make up the sporting framework must work in sync with each other. There should be no disconnect among the stakeholders and all the others that would be involved, including the ministry and the sport company, key stakeholders. There should be an overarching plan to which individuals can subscribe and align their operations to in order to ensure that the national mandate is being pursued. That is the nature of a sport policy. So subsequent to the establishment of a national mandate, there has to be a regulatory framework implemented to steer stakeholders in the direction of the national strategy. If this regulatory framework is not instituted, then there would be no incentive for anyone to follow or adopt the policy mandates. This is my opinion on the question.
Thank you very much, Doc. Ephraim?
Well, I agree with both Doc and Mushtaq, you know, but the critical thing is the national policy, whether there's a framework. And, you know, when I say framework, as Mushtaq say, everybody taking the corner, I doing my right stuff, they ain't bother. But it's to see the collective effort of each sport and their contribution to the national level. So that, you know, most of the times people study this, you know, like Mushtaq might have mentioned just now, 10 goals, 24, whether it's athletics, you know. But, you know, we needed to discuss that. I mean, how realistic, how long it took us to win 2 or 3, what we have in place. So that framework, so that people can understand their contribution to the national level, and not just I alone and you know, that kind of thing. So it must have, if there's a framework developed and people understand it. And as much as sometimes most people, you know, you want to get that forum, but people tend to, you know, my sport's small, I don't want to go to that, or I too big, they ain't go. So that's the kind of attitude we get.
All right. Thanks a lot, Ephraim. Thank you, Dr. Adams. Thank you, Mushtaq. Thank you, Sonia. And thank you, Ephraim. Just in wrapping up, each person, 30 seconds, closing remarks. Mushtaq, we start with you.
Okay. Boy, you must give the ladies the opportunity first, boy.
No problem. No problem.
No, we're saving the best for last, Bridget.
I am putting the rose between the two thorns.
Okay. So Bridget, go ahead. I will come between. No. Hey, this was a fantastic environment, a fantastic forum. Sorry for my passion. I mean, I've been involved. I grow. I'm a student of sport by learning, and I'm always willing to share. My philosophy in life is that knowledge shared is knowledge multiplied, and anybody, anywhere, anyhow need me to be involved in anything to share my knowledge that I've gained over the years through interaction with people like Ephraim and Bridget and all the other colleagues that we learn so much from, is there to serve. And you talk about our sports policy. We also have a draft sports tourism policy. I would love to see it happening. I don't agree, as you said, that the sport policy was consultative. Yes, it might have been consultative, but that was the outcome that I read in that sport policy. A lot of the sessions I attended was not reflected in this policy. So, you know, we could have a theoretical consultation, but what is written is something different. So one of my colleagues say, hey, the theory and the practice does not mesh. And when it don't mesh, we will end up with problem. Thank you very much for including me.
Thank you, Mushtaq. And now we go to the Rose, Dr. Adams.
Yeah, everyone has a role and a role to play, and it must be driven internally, especially the sport administrators. The government has a role to play as well, and administrators need to do some introspection and critically analyze or do critical analysis of their organizations on the way forward. They should engage in good governance and sometimes thinking out of the box to plan their next steps in continuing the shared vision that they would have had in their strategic plan. And please do not leave the strategic plan on the shelf.
Thank you very much, Doc. And on Uncle Leg.
Uncle Leg.
Yes.
I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for having me being part of this. The person or my personality is one of sharing. Even while as the president of the NGAs, it was never something of me not to assist any other federation in any way, whether it's if we had extra uniforms, whatever it is. But sessions like these, I think we need more of these. We need to engage the other federations. They should. I hope they were invited so that they could understand and take some lessons from these types of discussions, develop that. Well, I don't know how to develop passion, but the passion is key. And understanding the results, where you are, where you want to go, and how you're really going to get there. We have to understand that where we are, we must assess where we are, where we want to go, and how we're going to get there, what is required, and continue to monitor.
Thank you very much, Ephraim. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure to be the moderator for this panel discussion of these esteemed and distinguished gentlemen and women, all with a level of passion for sport and the development of young people and our athletes in Trinidad and Tobago. It has been received from the discussions and from the audience the need for collaborative approach towards the development of sport. In the past, we at UTT have been having discussions together with other stakeholders, TTOC and other persons, in terms of discussions about national coaching standards. And what has been identified here is to have something of a national standard that exists among administrators of various sporting associations in Trinidad and Tobago, so that we can all sing from the same hymn book. And at the end of the day, each one could help the other towards the holistic goal of success of sport in Trinidad and Tobago. We have identified, I love the idea of Jameson Riggs in terms of having that discussion among sport administrators, that collective discussion that will lead towards that type of approach. At the University of Trinidad and Tobago, we like to turn ideas into reality. And I can tell you that this is a discussion that we have been having already, and together with other stakeholders, the pathway to have this level of success will be generated. And we hope that others will buy into the discussions and so that when we develop that strategy, it will be shared, it will be a shared vision by all stakeholders in sport, so that we can ensure that administrators play the critical role that needs to be played for sport development. And by extension, we will see improved athletic performances on the court, on the field, on the track, in the water. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been an esteemed pleasure of mine. I thank you all for signing in and for logging into this discussion. Have a wonderful evening, and we will be engaging you soon again where we discuss other topics of